After settling the matter with the Wuxia steel sword, Wang Chong heaved a sigh of relief. In the days to come, he focused his efforts on looking for traces of the demonic Emperor Old Man, while continuing to visit the Ghost Tree District for the chess match. On the other hand, Uncle Li Lin had acted swiftly on the matter Wang Chong entrusted him with. As though out of anger from the bold attempts of the Assassin Pavilion in attempting to assassinate Wang Chong, in just 2 short days, news had reached the streets. The Imperial Army had found the nest of an assassin organization that seemed to be harboring malicious intentions. Every single one of them was killed on the spot, and corpses filled the entire courtyard. This matter caused quite a storm in the capital. It was said that many of the experts of the Imperial Army were mobilized, and 5 to 6 commanders were involved in the operation. Many people had witnessed the operation with their own eyes, and all of them said that there was likely to be a backstory to this matter. Even so, given their dress-up, cloaked in black and armed with secret weapons, without a doubt, they were all assassins. Thus, no one spoke up for them. When Wang Chong heard of this matter, he chuckled lightly. He wrote a letter to Mayasame Ayaka and dumped the matter to the back of his head. Just when Wang Chong was living his life peacefully, a commotion was going on in the depths of the royal palace. The darkness of the night loomed over the sky. It was an abandoned palace in a remote location of the royal palace. But at this moment, it was brightly illuminated by whole rows of lanterns hung on the trees and the roof. Imperial Army members densely filled the courtyard of the palace, and with a single glance, they numbered in hundreds, perhaps even reaching 1,000. Today was a huge day for the Imperial Army members. There wasn't a single person in the Imperial Army who didn't know that this was the day for the auction for the second weapon of the number 1 blacksmith of Great Tang. As such, many commanders had arrived early and were waiting in anticipation for the unveiling of the weapon. After the battle between Zhao Fengqin and Huang Xiaotian, there wasn't a single person here who didn't know about the sharpness, beauty, and rarity of the Wuxia steel sword. To them, this was a huge opportunity to heighten their own strength. More importantly, this item was exclusive. It was one of a kind, and it was impossible to obtain it anywhere else. What other weapons could be more fitting than the Wuxia steel sword to complement the standing of the Imperial Army? I finally waited for the day for the unveiling of Gongzi's new weapon. It's a weapon that took an entire month to forge. I truly can't wait to see what it is. If only he could forge more of it. The first weapon has been taken by Commander Zhao. I wonder who'll be lucky one this time. Indeed, if only I had a Wuxia steel sword as well. Why must it be so expensive? The courtyard of the palace was bustling. Everyone knew that Wang Chong had entrusted the sales of the Wuxia steel weapons to his uncle, Li Lin, and at this moment, there wasn't a single person in the Imperial Army who didn't know of Li Lin. It's starting. Suddenly, a commotion sounded. Everyone lifted their heads and saw the doors before them open. Brilliant light poured out from the interior of the room. Dressed in heavy armor with a sword by his waist, Li Lin appeared imposingly before the crowd. In an instant, the bustling Imperial Army members abruptly fell silent. Those who wish to join the auction can enter now based on the note issued previously, Li Lin said authoritatively. Immediately, an Imperial Army commander passed the note that Wang Chong issued to them previously and entered the room with a huge smile. Everyone knew that the competition for this auction would be intense, and the Wuxia steel weapon would be anything but cheap. But money, who the heck cares about money? As long as they could buy the sword that was capable of slicing through metal as though mud, what did money mean? Besides, as members of the Imperial Army, they didn't have many places to spend money on anyway. On top of that, even if they found themselves in dire need of money in the future, surely they didn't have to worry about being unable to sell this kind of top-notch weapon? 20 to 30 Imperial Army commanders entered. Next, those who have the wooden token can enter, Li Lin continued. This was Li Lin's own initiative. Even though Wang Chong wanted to sell the bidding qualifications batch by batch, Li Lin thought that there was no need for it. Being in the Imperial Army, he knew how popular the Wuxia steel was. Regardless of where he went, everyone was talking about the auction in Blue Bottle Pavilion and the battle between Zhao Fengqin and Huang Xiaotian. The Wuxia steel weapon, which was described to be unbreakable and unimaginably sharp, had everyone's blood boiling in passion, and their desire to possess it blazed. Being in the Imperial Army, he understood how strong the thirst for it was. That was also the reason why he dared to set up such a system. One must know that there were more than 100,000 troops in the Imperial Army. Yet Wang Chong only sold a single Wuxia steel sword every month. It would be surprising if they weren't frenzied about it. Thus, Li Lin decided to split the auction into 2 tiers on his own accord. The first tier was the holders of the notes that Wang Chong issued previously. These note holders were entitled to a 10% discount. The wooden tokens that Li Lin issued formed the second tier, and this tier possessed fewer privileges than the former. Those in possession of the wooden token were allowed to join the auction, but they had to pay an additional 10% on top of the auction price. Every wooden token cost 200 gold taels, and it would become useless after the auction. If one wanted to join the next auction, they had to buy another one. Others might think it was expensive, but Li Lin felt that he had already lowered the price to the bare minimum. Given that there were more than 100,000 soldiers in the Imperial Army, lack of demand was something he didn't fear. Furthermore, how could those who were willing to spend several dozen thousand gold taels to buy a Wuxia steel sword hesitate over a mere 200 gold taels? In Li Lin's view, this was the best way to auction the Wuxia steel sword. At the same time, he would be able to sieve out those insincere buyers through this method. As for the notes which Wang Chong issued, it was a huge waste. However, the matter was already done, so there was no use saying anything about it. In an instant, 70 to 80 commanders of the Imperial Army rushed in. Buy from the sales of the wooden token, Li Lin had already earned a profit of around 15,000. To earn 15,000 taels from the entrance fee from an auction alone, he would be a fool to not do this. Next, those with the metal token can enter, Li Lin said. This was the lowest tier. There were many people who were interested and curious about the Wuxia steel sword. Since that was the case, Li Lin thought of profiting from them as well. After all, the more spectators there were, the easier it was for word to spread. This could help to broaden the number of interested buyers in the Imperial Army. Thus, Li Lin chose to implement the system of the steel token as well. Each of these steel tokens cost just 10 gold taels. With these, one was given the right to spectate the proceedings of the auction. But of course, they weren't allowed to bid. At the same time, they weren't allocated any seats as well. Despite the lack of service, given that there were more than 100,000 potential customers out there, Li Lin wasn't worried at all. In an instant, several hundreds of Imperial Army members charged in. This was yet another profit of a few thousand gold taels. Just by setting up this auction, Li Lin had already earned over 20,000 gold taels. After which, Li Lin returned to the inner room. The palaces in the royal city were exceedingly vast. Residences of ordinary large clans couldn't start to compare up to them. At the very front of the hall, away from the crowd, sat 3 commanders. The one seated in the middle was Zhao Fengchen. Time passed swiftly, and it had been a month since Zhao Fengchen had become a marshal. Compared to before, Zhao Fengchen's disposition seemed much more valiant, imposing, and authoritative. Li Lin walked in and bowed slightly to Zhao Fengchen before walking to a massive wooden stand of around 1 zhang long in the center of the hall. Lord Li, where is the Wuxia steel sword? Hurry up and take it out. Stop hooking our appetite. Indeed, we're all anxious to see it. Lord Li, it has already been a month. We brothers are already dying of anticipation, so hurry up and show it to us. Everyone in the room urged impatiently. They couldn't bear to wait any longer for it. Lord Li, surely you aren't playing with us? Some of the Imperial Army commanders even expressed their clear displeasure. You all are so anxious that you all can't even wait a moment longer? Li Lin chuckled. This was the kind of effect he wanted. Since that's the case, I won't keep you all hanging. The second Wuxia steel sword is right here. Pa! As he said those words, Li Lin struck the 1 zhang long wooden platform before him. Pong! The wooden platform immediately broke apart, and hidden in the platform was a 7 chi long weapon. It was seated on top of a black metal table of the same length. In an instant, the entire hall fell silent. Everyone thought that Li Lin was using the wooden platform to organize the auction. No one thought that there would be such a trick behind the wooden platform. Lord Li, what's that? An Imperial Army commander stood up as he pointed at the bizarre weapon seated atop the metal table. Many people thought that Wang Chong's new work would be a sword, similar to what he crafted before. But from the looks of it, that wasn't the case. Even though it was concealed within a black wooden sheath, they could make out the shape of the weapon. It was only 2 fingers thick, but it had a length of 7 chi. On top of that, the weapon had an elegant curve to its blade. It was very different from any other weapons they had seen before. Ha ha ha. Well asked. This is the first saber that my nephew Wang Chong had forged. This in itself adds to the collectability of this saber. On top of that, I see that most of you are surprised by the length of it. That's right, the design of this saber is different from the sword before, and the material used for this saber is also twice of the sword. On top of that, this saber is even sharper than the sword from before. Borrowing the words of my nephew, this saber is crafted for slaughter. Thus, he gave the saber the name Death's Abyss. None of those in the range of this saber would be able to escape from death. Li Lin spoke with composure. Even though he was facing so many Imperial Army commanders, there wasn't the slightest hint of fear on his face. Death's Abyss. Everyone was impressed. Just by the name itself, they could sense that it was a top-notch product with high collectability. More important, it was the first saber forged by the #1 swordsmith in the world. Just this by itself meant that it could be sold at a very high price in the future. The trip here is indeed worth it. His first saber. This is truly a one-of-a-kind object. In the hall, the Imperial Army commanders trembled in excitement. They didn't lack money. Rather, they found nothing worthy to spend their money on. This kind of weapon could help bring out their noble standing, augment their strength, and it had collecting value as well. This was truly the ideal product for them to spend their money on. Li Lin, how much is this weapon worth? Well asked. Li Lin smiled. His eyes lit up as he announced the starting price of the auction. The starting bid for this Death's Abyss is 80,000 gold taels. There is only one saber, and the highest bidder wins. The auction starts now. Boom! Li Lin's words caused a huge uproar in the hall. The excitement which they had suppressed for an entire month suddenly came bursting out. 85,000, 88,000, 90,000, 100,000, 110,000. In a brief moment, the price of the sword had already soared beyond 100,000. Taking even Li Lin was taken by surprise. At 80,000 gold taels, this saber was already twofold the price of the sword sold previously. As such, Li Lin thought that most would be hesitant to bid. However, from the look of it, a month of anticipation had fed the crowd's desire. Furthermore, the idea of it being exclusive had stimulated their interest in the auction. 115,000, 118,000, 120,000. The bid was still increasing rapidly, and those spectators couldn't help but feel thrilled by the sight. It wasn't every day that one got to see the sales of a valuable top-notch saber. The sabers outside were only worth a maximum of 600 gold taels. Only in the Imperial Army could one see weapons that were worth several 10,000 gold taels. Even though it was expensive, many interested people had started preparing for this auction since over half a month ago. Some even diving straight into action after witnessing the battle between Commander Zhao and Commander Huang. It's too thrilling. 120,000 gold taels. That's more than 3 times the price of the previous sword. Can't you tell how valuable that saber is? Even the material used is 2 times that of the previous sword. Furthermore, this is the first saber master crafted. Even if one chooses not to wield it, its price will definitely rise with time, reaping one immense profit in the future. Did you see that? That's Commander Jing. Even Commander Jing is here. He's from a true prestigious clan with great affluence and a long history. The Jing clan has already been one of the top clans since the Sui dynasty. It isn't something that other clans outside can match up to. Indeed, even though the Jing clan has kept a low profile, causing it to be less known than the other clans out there, It is, in the truest term, a behemoth. 120,000 gold taels means nothing to a clan of that level. That's true. There's the Bai clan as well. If I recall correctly, this seems to be their 6th generation of Imperial Army commander. There's no way they would allow this opportunity slip by them. To think that the demand for the Wuxia steel sword would be so great. At the back of the hall, the faces of the spectators were red in agitation, and they seemed even more excited than those involved in the auction. To spectate such bustle with just 10 gold taels was indeed a worthy trade. Who in the Imperial Army would care about 10 mere gold taels? 139,000, 140,000, 141,000, 142,000, 142,500. There was a limit to the price of every single weapon. When the price reached 140,000 or so, the increment started to slow. Clearly, the crowd thought that the true value of this weapon was around 150,000 gold taels, or at the very least not exceeding that amount. Not bad. Seated behind Li Lin, Zhao Fengchen nodded slightly. This price was already way beyond his expectations. It seemed like the popularity of the Wuxia steel sword was truly immense in the Imperial Army. Hee. Upon seeing this sight, Li Lin couldn't help but chuckle. This price may seem decent, but Wang Chong had explained to him about the uniqueness of this saber was infused within it was a whole new advanced technology, and it had gone through an additional refinement process as compared to the previous sword sold. Back then, Li Lin's sharp senses told him that this could serve as an impetus for further bring up the price. Everyone, speaking of which, I have yet to show you all the weapon. Thus, allow me to present it to all of you. Li Lin suddenly grabbed the handle of the saber and pulled on it lightly. Clang! A crisp sound reminiscent of the call of a mighty dragon seeped into the hearts of the spectators. Then, a cold gleam similar to the dance of a WYRM flashed across the ceiling of the hall. In an instant, the light in the entire room dimmed, as though their radiance were stolen. Everyone's heart abruptly stopped at this instant. What Li Lin grasped in his hand was a uniquely designed long saber. It was a 7 chi long, and from the hilt to the very tip, it was precisely 2 fingers wide. The slight arc of the saber brought out an enchanting aesthetics to it. What that took their breaths away was the bewitching flowing river and fleeting clouds pattern on the surface of its blade. No one would say a word if one claimed that it had reached the apex of beauty. Yet, at the same time, it exuded an aura of callousness, and it felt as though it would escape from Li Lin's grasp at any moment to strike them down. A cold and savage aura struck the hearts of the crowd. In an instant, the bustling hall fell absolutely silent. Zhao Fengchen was in the midst of bringing a cup of tea to his lips when he saw the saber, and he froze. Due to the lack of time, he didn't get a chance to view the saber when Li Lin first brought it in. He thought that since the two were both with steel weapons, the only difference would be in their exteriors. However, at this moment, Zhao Fengchen realized that the saber in Li Lin's hand was very much different from his sword. And this wasn't just a matter of the design. Shua! Upon seeing that he had succeeded in grasping the attention of the entire hall, Li Lin nodded in satisfaction. Shua! Grasping the blade with just his right hand, Li Lin did a light vertical cut. His movement wasn't large, but the effects that this cut brought was astonishing. Hoo! The temperature in the hall abruptly lowered. Originating from where Li Lin stood, a huge wind suddenly blustered. The peaceful air current in the room turned chaotic with a slight jerk of Li Lin's wrist. The air seemed to have been cut into innumerable pieces, and even the wooden debris around the black metal table started flying in the air, turning in a circular motion as though it was swept by a vortex. The two commanders by Zhao Fengchen's side who had been watching the entire spectacle nonchalantly suddenly narrowed their eyes, and their faces suddenly changed. Exceedingly sharp, Li Lin's cultivation was far superior to Wang Chong's. Causing the stir caused by his vertical cut was much greater than that of Wang Chong's. Everyone in the room was an expert, and with a glance, they could tell that the sword had been sharpened to the extremities. Even Zhao Fengchen's sword couldn't start to compare with it. Ah! My clothes! One of the Imperial Army members attending the auction suddenly exclaimed. Lowering his head, he glanced at the undershirt, which was slightly exposed out of his armor, in shock. Unknowingly, his undershirt had been torn apart by the wind Li Lin's saber had generated. Everyone immediately turned to look at the 7-chi-long saber once more, but with a vastly different expression this time. This saber was way too sharp. With this kind of saber, challenging a slightly stronger opponent wouldn't pose a problem at all. Before such a powerful weapon, the movements of one's opponent would be restricted, leaving him unable to exert his full strength. 150,000. Lord Li, I'll take that saber. Someone suddenly raised his hand and shouted. 160,000. I want it. 180,000. 190,000. Recovering from their shock, the crowd immediately flew into a frenzy. This saber had reached an inconceivable level of quality, becoming an ideal weapon of slaughter. Truly, it lived up to its name, Death's Abyss. More importantly, it was only available here. 200,000. Another voice shouted. Great! Li Lin's face was flushed, and he clenched his fists tightly in agitation. The reason why he didn't draw the blade previously was to bring up the hype of the auction when things were starting to die down, and the effects didn't let him down. Wait a moment! Suddenly, a cold bellow sounded. This voice was extremely bright, and it carried immense might with it, causing even the roof of the palace to shake slightly. The sudden bellow caused the hall to plunge into silence. Countless gazes shot toward the direction of the voice, and astonishment appeared on the faces of many. Lord Huang! Lord Huang! General Huang! Fear marked the faces of some of the imperial army members seated in front, and some of them even stood up and bowed respectfully. Huang Xiaotian, what are you doing? Zhao Fengchen had been sitting silently at the very front of the hall. However, upon seeing the intruder, his face immediately turned cold. He stood up, and a powerful aura gushed out as though a huge torrent. The temperature in the hall dipped, and the atmosphere suddenly turned tense. Amidst the group who had just entered, there was a brawny, full-bearded, tanned man. He was Zhao Fengchen's archenemy, Huang Xiaotian. The fight over the seat of a marshal had caused Zhao Fengchen and Huang Xiaotian's relationship to turn hostile, and after the selection, their relationship worsened further. No one could have imagined that Huang Xiaotian would appear here. In an instant, the entire hall fell silent. Everyone held their breath, not daring to speak a word. The heavy atmosphere crushed down on everyone in the hall. Humph! Why can't I come? Does this palace belong to you? Besides, aren't you lot the ones who invited me here? Huang Xiaotian possessed large menacing eyes, and his black full beard on his face made him look boorish. On top of that, he spoke loudly. His characteristics gave others the impression that he was an unreasonable person. Wang! As he spoke those words, he flicked his wrist and a metal token appeared between his fingers. Seeing the metal token, Zhao Fengchen's complexion immediately turned awful. He quickly glanced at Li Lin. It isn't me, I don't know about it as well. The twist came too abruptly, and Li Lin's complexion wasn't any better than Zhao Fengchen's. The relationship between Zhao Fengchen and Huang Xiaotian was as though fire and water, and before Zhao Fengchen, Huang Xiaotian was a taboo topic. The other party was clearly here to wreak havoc and embarrass him. The metal token in Huang Xiaotian's hand wasn't issued from Li Lin. He was already on the same boat as Zhao Fengchen, and on top of that, this auction was organized by him. How could he so be foolish as to wreck his own auction? Assissus. Seeing Li Lin shake his head, Zhao Fengchen took in a deep breath, and his complexion alleviated slightly. Thinking about it now, it wasn't difficult at all for Huang Xiaotian to procure the metal token. After all, the number of followers the other party had didn't pale to him in any way. Huang Xiaotian, what do you intend to do? This isn't your campground. General Huang, don't do anything rash. Take a good look here. Even though this auction is organized by Lord Zhao and Li Lin, the buyers are our brothers. If you dare to wreak havoc here, it is equivalent to going against all of us. The two commanders seated beside Zhao Fengchen stood up as well. Even though Zhao Fengchen had won the martial selection, Huang Xiaotian's influence was still immense. Despite his failure, he still managed to land the seat of a vice-marshal. Thus, no one dared to go too far. Humph! It is exactly for the sake of our brothers that I am here today. I can't simply sit idly and watch as you scoundrels scam our brothers' money. With an icy-cold expression, Huang Xiaotian bellowed rudely. As he spoke, he walked straight toward the center of the hall. "Your name is Li Lin?" Walking up to Li Lin, Huang Xiaotian narrowed his eyes. Cold words left his disdainful lips, and he didn't even try to conceal the threat in his tone at all. "You sure have good eyes to follow Zhao Fengchen. I hope that you achieve great things in the Imperial Army." "Huang Xiaotan, how dare you!" Smacking the table, Zhao Fengchen flew into a rage. On the other hand, threatened by Huang Xiaotian in his face, Li Lin's complexion was also awful. Even though his position in the Imperial Army rose greatly due to Wang Chong's wood steel sword, he still wasn't a match for figures of Huang Xiaotian and Zhao Fengchen's level. Regardless of whether it was Huang Xiaotian or Zhao Fengchen, they possessed vast connections and powerful backing. Li Lin had once secretly looked into it, and his investigations unintentionally brought him to the depths of the royal palace. Fear struck him, and he didn't dare to dig any further then. A faction war of this scale wasn't a joking matter. Between their fight, Li Lin knew that he was only a small shrimp. If not for the slight backing he possessed as a son-in-law of the Wang clan, even though he had earned merit by presenting the wood steel sword to Zhao Fengchen previously, Huang Xiaotian's fearsome influence would still be more than sufficient to reduce him to dust. "Lord Huang, this isn't Mirage Dragon. There are many brothers watching here. Please show some self-respect." At this moment, Li Lin suddenly spoke up. His words immediately sent a wave of shock throughout the crowd, and even Zhao Fengchen was taken aback as well. "Li Lin, how dare you speak to me like that?" Huang Xiaotian glared at Li Lin frostily. He didn't expect that a mere gate commander like Li Lin would dare to criticize him before so many people. "Lord Huang, I'll repeat myself. This isn't Mirage Dragon, and if Lord Huang intends to cause trouble, I'll have to ask you to leave." Facing Huang Xiaotian's ferocious glare fearlessly, Li Lin repeated his words. In the hall, the two commanders beside Zhao Fengchen stood up to persuade Li Lin to step down. Making an enemy out of Huang Xiaotian wasn't a wise decision. However, Zhao Fengchen shook his hand and stopped them. Zhao Fengchen had yet to recover from his surprise, and he stared at Li Lin deeply. Many thoughts flashed through his head. He had investigated Li Lin's background, and he could tell many things from it. There was a fundamental flaw in Li Lin's personality, cowardly. The fact that he had remained as a section commander in the North Gates for more than a decade spoke a lot. Thus, Zhao Fengchen didn't bear much expectations of Li Lin. He felt that promoting him to one of the lower-tier commanders should be more than sufficient to repay the favor. Yet, this cowardly Li Lin actually dared to talk back to Huang Xiaotian before so many people. This was beyond his imagination. Looking at Li Lin, Zhao Fengchen suddenly noticed some changes in him. Seems like he's really different from before. Zhao Fengchen's eyes rippled, and new thoughts about Li Lin abruptly sprouted in his head. "How dare a small commander like you talk back to me?" Huang Xiaotian's eyes were cold as though the winter frost. If looks could kill, Li Lin would have died countless times then. Huang Xiaotian never held back against those who dared to offend him in his face. However, Huang Xiaotian didn't make a move in the end. "Humph! You're just a trash who climbed to this seat because of a woman. I'll let you off on Duke Zhou's account." Pa! As though a flash of lightning, Huang Xiaotian's hands swiftly darted toward the death's abyss in Li Lin's hands and grabbed it. Boom! Before Li Lin could react, he was already jolted backward by a massive force. He staggered many steps backward before he managed to steady himself. Li Lin's face turned completely red. Even within the Imperial Army, Li Lin could be considered as an expert. However, he was still far from matching up to those of Huang Xiaotian's caliber. Even though Huang Xiaotian lost to Zhao Fengchen eventually, he still became the #1 expert beneath that of the three great marshals in the Imperial Army. How could Li Lin possibly be a match for him? "Brothers, I am not here to settle my private grudge. The reason why I am here is because I can't tolerate these fellows deceiving the money of our brothers. With just a few simple movements, Huang Xiaotian stole the Death's Abyss from Li Lin's hand easily. Grabbing the hilt with his right hand, he slowly turned it around the hall. A cold gleam shot across the air, causing the crowd to feel dizzy-headed. However, Huang Xiaotian glanced at the Death's Abyss disdainfully, as though this wasn't a precious sword but a worthless lump of metal. Huang Xiaotian, what do you intend to do? Zhao Fengchen uttered coldly. Humph, haven't I spoken of my intentions already? I can't stand you all deceiving our brothers, so I came to expose you all. Huang Xiaotian turned around to look at Zhao Fengchen and sneered coldly. A grand disposition shrouded around him, capturing everyone's attention. The tougher the weapon, the easier it breaks. Zhao Fengchen and Li Lin, surely you two should know this logic. Any weapon that's longer than 3 qi will break easily, and the even more so the longer it is. That's the reason why very few swordsmiths craft swords longer than 3 qi. Even 4 qi is a rarity in the market. Yet what's with this 7 qi weapon? Do you take everyone for fools? Huang Xiaotian bellowed loudly, and a huge commotion broke out in the hall. Everyone here had come for the name of the Wuxia steel. Given that Zhao Fengchen was here, and it hadn't been long since the weapon was unveiled, none of them had truly considered this problem. As soon as Huang Xiaotian brought up this problem, everyone came to a realization. Indeed, the tougher the weapon was, the easier it broke. Even though the crowd here didn't know much about swordsmithing, this was common sense. This was also the reason why no one forged weapons longer than 4 qi in the Central Plains, with the exception of spears, halberds, and those of that kind. However, this kind of weapons were mainly designed for the battlefield, and they weren't really valuable. There were many of such weapons in the Great Tang's military armory. If one broke, they could just grab another one. However, swords and sabers were different. No one wanted to buy sword or saber that could break easily. Lord Huang's words make sense. Indeed, this saber is a little too long. The Imperial Army commanders nodded in agreement. Initially, they were displeased by Huang Xiaotian's abrupt appearance, thinking that he was here to get back at Zhao Fengchen. But at this moment, they suddenly felt that his words were logical. Humph, humph. Raising Death's Abyss high in the air, so that everyone could get a good look, Huang Xiaotian observed the expression of the crowd and sneered coldly within. On the other hand, Zhao Fengchen and Li Lin's faces darkened. As Wang Chong's wood steel sword played a pivotal role in Zhao Fengchen defeating Huang Xiaotian and becoming the new marshal, he subconsciously trusted Li Lin and Wang Chong. On the other hand, Li Lin fully trusted Wang Chong because the latter was his nephew. Thus, the both of them unknowingly neglected the fundamental flaw of a long saber. Upon hearing Huang Xiaotian's words, they suddenly realized the problem with it as well. A tough sword being brittle was common sense. Huang Xiaotian wasn't being completely unreasonable. Li Lin. Zhao Fengchen's first thought was to question Li Lin of it, but as soon as this thought appeared in his head, he immediately held himself back. It was too late to ask about it, especially before such a huge crowd. Besides, if something was wrong with the sword, before such a huge crowd and under Huang Xiaotian's interference, their reputation would immediately drop into the gutters. To dare to deceive so many of their brothers like that, they would lose their place in the entire imperial army. As this thought appeared in their mind, the duo's faces turned grave. But at this moment they had no path of retreat. Chong-er, you mustn't screw up now. Li Lin's heart was nearly beating out of his chest. He didn't have any time to plan how he could get the Death's Abyss back from Huang Xiaotian. Standing in the center of the hall, he could feel the intentions behind the gazes around him slowly turning hostile. The other party was his nephew. Even if Li Lin were to be done in, he couldn't say a word at all. Brothers, sharpness isn't all there is to a weapon. This weapon may look elegant on the surface, but the truth is that it is nothing more than a worthless lump of metal. Today, I'll let you all see for yourselves what this Death's Abyss they call truly is, so that you all can judge whether it is worth spending your fortune on. As Huang Xiaotian spoke those words, he lifted the 7 qi long Death's Abyss with one hand and gently bent the forefinger of the other hand. Then, swift as though a bolt of lightning, he flicked straight at the point at the third quarter from the hilt. Hong long long. The sound of wind and lightning raged, and a golden might brilliant as though a comet suddenly burst from Huang Xiaoyan's finger. Even though this might was forged using origin energy, it was as resilient as adamantine. Adamantine's storm finger. This was one of the ultimate techniques Huang Xiaotian possessed. This technique concentrated all of one's strength in a single finger, making it as powerful as the indestructible adamantine. With just this single finger, Huang Xiaotian was able to rival armed opponents barehanded in combat, regardless of what kind of powerful weapons they were wielding. In fact, Huang Xiaotian had a record of breaking over 100 top-notch blades. Back then, when Huang Xiaoyan was out on a mission, he saw a several zhang tall Xuanwu cliff while passing by a towering mountain. The entire cliff was actually an entire piece of Xuanwu rock embedded within the mountain. Huang Xiaoyan's companion jokingly challenged him to leave behind words on the Xuanwu rock with his adamantine storm finger. With a slight smile, Huang Xiaotian walked up to the cliff, and with just a mere flick, spiderweb-like cracks started appearing on the rock, and before long, the entire rock crumbled into innumerable fragments. This incident became extremely famous among the imperial army. Even a few decades later, when people spoke of Huang Xiaotian, they would still bring up this incident. Very few weapons could withstand Huang Xiaoyan's adamantine storm finger. At the very least, it was unlikely that this 7-chi-long saber would survive his attack. "Wait a moment," Zhao Fengchen hurriedly said in an attempt to stop him, but it was already too late. Hong long long. The sound of a storm filled the entire hall, and in that moment, it seemed as though countless lightning were streaking across the hall. For an instant, time seemed to have stopped. "Who?" A great wind hustled, and powerful air currents accompanied Huang Xiaoyan's finger as it flew straight toward the death's abyss. As Huang Xiaoyan's finger approached the saber assumed by Asuen, everyone's heart slowly rose to their throat. The atmosphere was extremely tense. Everyone knew that Huang Xiaoyan's finger was capable of smashing even cliffs, so it couldn't be gauged by normal standards. On top of that, this flick wielded his full strength. No one knew whether the death's abyss would be able to withstand this blow or not. Hong long. Finally, Huang Xiaoyan's finger struck the saber at the third quarter point of the blade. The hall shook violently, as though a formless comet had struck the palace. At the same time, the blade of the saber trembled furiously, and the sound of the ringing of the saber filled the entire hall. However, in the next moment everyone was dumbstruck. Despite a full-strength attack from Huang Xiaoyan's adamantine storm finger, that 7-chi Wuxia steel saber was undamaged. How is this possible? At that moment, no one was more shocked by Huang Xiaotian. The adamantine storm finger possessed incomparable strength, and with this technique, he had broken countless powerful weapons. There were barely any weapons that could withstand its might. Furthermore, this saber was 7-chi long, making it exceptionally prone to breaking. As long as he struck this weapon at its third quarter point, it should have broken into countless fragments. It should have been impossible for a weapon that had a length of 7-chi and could survive this attack to exist. Impossible! Swiftly and forcefully, Huang Xiaotian flicked his finger at it once more. Hong long long. The ground trembled, but the 7-chi long death's abyss in Huang Xiaoyan's hand still remained completely undamaged. In that instant, Huang Xiaoyan's face paled. Just as Huang Xiaotian pulled back his finger to prepare for a third flick, Zhao Fengchen finally came to the limits of his tolerance. "Huang Xiaotian, you better stop it right now," Zhao Fengchen bellowed. "If you don't stop now, don't blame me for getting nasty." With his right hand on the Wuxia steel sword by his left waist, Zhao Fengchen brought out the disposition of a marshal and glared at Huang Xiaotian authoritatively. Just like what Li Lin had said, this wasn't Mirage Dragon, Huang Xiaoyan's territory. If the other party was going to continue acting so audaciously, then he shouldn't blame him for getting nasty. "Ha ha ha, Vice Marshal Huang. I knew it. You're here to wreak havoc. You're trying to use this matter to get back at us." Li Lin burst into laughter, but on the inside, he heaved a huge sigh of relief. The matter just now had nearly frightened him out of his wits. If it were to break under Huang Xiaoyan's attack, then he could quit the imperial army at this very instant. Even Zhao Fengchen would never forgive him. Chong-er, well done. At this moment, Li Lin felt so exhilarated that he couldn't help but laugh heartily. His nephew had truly made him proud this time. Li Lin was sure that after this matter with Huang Xiaotian, his standing in the Imperial Army would surely rise exponentially. At the same time, the Wuxia steel weapon would also become even more famous. The Imperial Army commanders who would knock on the doors on the Wang clan to plead for swords would be much greater and much more formidable than before. He could already see the bright future before him. Lord Huang, this location is prepared for those interested in the saber. If you aren't here to bid for the saber, please leave the premises now. Also, even if Lord Huang intends to bid for it. Li Lin glanced at the metal token in Huang Xiaoyan's hand with a deep glance, as though mocking him, and said, "You should change your token first. This kind of metal token that can be bought with 10 gold taels only qualifies one to stand at the very back," at which Li Lin gestured to the very back of the hall. Boom! Hearing those words, the crowd immediately burst into laughter. If Huang Xiaotian succeeded, everyone would admire him for his righteousness. However, since he failed, it meant that there was nothing wrong with the weapons that Chong Gongzi forged. The nature of the event was completely different then. There were quite a few among the crowd who had been displeased with Huang Xiaotian from the very start. Upon seeing him make a fool out of himself, how could they miss this ideal opportunity to mock him? You! Glaring furiously at Li Lin, who was standing behind the black metal table, his face flushed in rage. It had been long since he made his name in the Imperial Army, and he possessed deep qualifications to match his standing. There was no one who didn't greet him respectfully upon seeing him. Yet, to be mocked before such a large crowd, how could he tolerate such humiliation? Huang Xiaotian was about to lash out, but Li Lin didn't give him the chance to. Everyone, I believe that you all have witnessed the quality of the Death's Abyss for yourself. The longer the weapon, the easier it breaks. However, the weapon my nephew forged broke this convention. Let's resume the bidding now. The previous bid is 190,000 taels. Is there anyone who wishes to raise the bid? Li Lin turned his gaze from Huang Xiaotian to the crowd below. Me. I offer 200,000. TSK, what does 200,000 taels count as? I offer 220,000. 230,000. Huang Xiaoyan's two adamant storm fingers had flicked out the enthusiasm in the crowd. The quality of this saber was simply way too high. Not only was it sharp enough to cut through metal as though mud, it was even able to remain undamaged from the two flicks of Huang Xiaoyan's adamant storm finger. Just by these itself, this saber was definitely one of the best, if not the best, in the world. 240,000. This time, the voice came from behind. Taken aback, Li Lin realized that it came from the Imperial Army commander seated on Zhao Fengchen's right. He was staring at the Death's Abyss in Li Lin's hands with an exceedingly passionate gaze. Why, Lord Li, can't we participate in this auction? The Imperial Army commander who goes by the surname of Zhou asked. Of course you can. Li Lin smiled brightly in agitation. Why would he say no? This was what he wanted. 240,000. Is there any higher bidder? 250,000. This time it was the commander by Zhao Fengchen's left. The passion in his gaze didn't lose out to the other. Initially, he had no intentions of participating in this auction. However, Huang Xiaoyan's adamant storm finger, that was a legend of the Imperial Army. Any weapon that was capable of withstanding two flicks from him was worth collecting. An incomparably sharp weapon possessing outstanding aesthetics and capable of withstanding the adamant storm finger. He didn't feel that it was a loss even if he were to buy it at 250,000 taels. 251,000. 260,000. This time, even Zhao Fengchen joined in as well. He upped the bid with a highly interested look. He could tell that the saber Wang Chong crafted was extraordinary, and it was very different from the sword he had bought from him previously. Zhao Fengchen wanted it sorely. Even if he didn't use it, it would be worth collecting. Zhao Fengchen possessed a good eye for weapons. In his view, the value of this saber would only grow higher in the future. Objects were often priced on their rarity, and this kind of exclusive collectible was very different from the mass-produced weapons in the market. Bastard! Huang Xiaotian stood there awkwardly. It would be humiliating for him to stay, even more so if he were to leave, leaving him in a difficult position. In an instant, his face became as dark as the bottom of a pot. At this moment, no one's attention was on him anymore. Everyone's energy had been devoted to the auction. Furthermore, what that infuriated Huang Xiaotian further was that these people weren't intentionally disregarding him. They were truly uninterested in him. The saber had stolen all of their consciousness. 300,000. Boom! Just when everyone was vying over the saber in agitation, a lightning-like voice abruptly sounded from the door. The voice contained immense strength, and even the tiles on the ceiling jolted before it. Inexplicable deep deference was induced in the crowd upon hearing that voice. Who? A black mantle danced in the air, and an imposing and majestic figure suddenly appeared at the entrance. The aura he exuded felt so powerful that it seemed that it was capable of tearing apart the heavens, and it was as if one was staring at a humongous mountain or ocean. Before this majestic and domineering aura, everyone felt as insignificant as an ant. Gra Grand Marshal, an Imperial Army commander, stuttered. His eyeballs were about to pop out from its sockets from shock. Hua! The room abruptly descended into chaos. The crowd, which was still fighting to bid over the weapons, suddenly trembled in fear, and one by one, they began kneeling down. And this wasn't just limited to the crowd. Shocked, Zhao Fengchen hurriedly got up from his seat and kneeled on the ground as well. Li Lin, as well as the other Imperial Army commanders, hurriedly got to the ground fearfully too, not daring to move at all. In an instant, the massive palace turned completely silent and still. Gr. Grand Marshal. At this moment, the only one left standing was Huang Xiaotian. He stood there blankly, his mind falling into turmoil. Everyone knew that there were three most powerful figures in the Imperial Army, and they were the three Grand Marshals. And the person before them was one of the three. Because of his deep qualifications, Huang Xiaotian acted domineering, disregarding everyone else, including Zhao Fengchen and Li Lin. However, before the three true heads of the Imperial Army, he meant nothing at all. Zhao Fengchen's group had privately made use of a palace to conduct an auction, and discovered by the Grand Marshal, they ought to be heavily punished, so this matter should be beneficial to Huang Xiaotian. However, Huang Xiaotian clearly remembered that the Grand Marshal had just... Huang Xiaotian's head seemed to have stalled. Duh, duh, duh. That mountain-like figure walked over with large strides, slowly approaching him. Just as Huang Xiaotian was filled with utmost expectations, that figure walked past him, as though he was invisible. In an instant, Huang Xiaotian's face turned ghastly pale. Your name is Li Lin? That mountain-like figure stopped right before Li Lin. Lowering his head, he smiled slightly, completely different from how he treated Huang Xiaotian. Yes, your humble subordinate is Li Lin. Unable to see the expression on the Grand Marshal's face, Li Lin's heart beat furiously. I have been looking for a suitable saber, but it had eluded me throughout the years. This saber, I like it a lot, as that imposing, grand, and domineering voice sounded. A hand stretched over and touched the body of the saber. A crisp and pleasant buzz sounded. However, it is a pity that the inscription on it is too weak. It is completely unworthy of a pinnacle sword like this. However, it doesn't matter. I can find another to inscribe on it once more. The Grand Marshal muttered as he swung the saber. He seemed to be extremely fond of it. With his face directed toward the floor, Li Lin was taken aback for a moment before he suddenly recalled a matter. Indeed, there was a saber expert among the three Grand Marshals. Even though it was a well-known fact, bizarrely, almost no one had seen him wielding a saber. In the past, Li Lin didn't pay much attention to it, and he didn't give it any thoughts either. However, from the looks of it now, it seemed like the reason for it was because of the other party's lack of saber. Or rather, he wasn't able to find a saber to his liking. Since that was the case, Lord, Li Lin is willing to offer this saber to the Grand Marshal without any compensation. Without any hesitation, Li Lin immediately spoke resolutely. 300,000 gold taels was a huge sum, but the favor of this Grand Marshal was worth a lot more than that to him and Lord Zhao Fengchen. With this lord covering them, no one would dare to harm them in the Imperial Army in the future. No one would dare to hinder their development. A matter such as that with Huang Xiaotian today would never happen again. Buying the favor of an Imperial Army Grand Marshal with 300,000 gold taels was a hard-to-come-by opportunity. Li Lin knew that if Wang Chong knew of it, he would surely support him. The moment Li Lin's voice sounded, Huang Xiaotian's face immediately turned pitch black. However, the reaction of the Grand Marshal was out of Li Lin's expectations. There's no need for it. 300,000 gold taels. That'll be it. There's no need to speak any further. The Grand Marshal spoke resolutely, leaving no grounds for negotiations. 300,000 gold taels. I'll have my men send it over to you later. Your name is Li Lin, right? I'll remember it. I like your saber a lot. Taking the saber from the table, the Grand Marshal turned around and left. His black mantle danced in the air, and in just a few moments, he disappeared amidst the shadows of the night. Even though the other party had taken away the Death's Abyss straight, no one thought that a Grand Marshal would go against his words. In the Imperial Army, the words of a Grand Marshal was worth gold. Li Lin and Zhao Fengchen stood up from the floor, and they glanced at one another. Slowly, a slight smile appeared in their eyes. When they looked around once more, Huang Xiaotian had already disappeared. However, they knew that the fellow wouldn't dare to act arrogantly before them anymore. That was the Grand Marshal of the Imperial Army. Wang Chong had truly done them a great favor this time. After leaving the Death's Abyss in the hands of his uncle, Wang Chong spent his days looking for the demonic Emperor Old Man while visiting the Ghost Tree District to make his move. There was no news on the demonic Emperor Old Man at all, and Wang Chong had no idea where to look either. Thus, there was no progress on the matter at all. On the other hand, atop the golden chessboard in Ghost Tree District, Wang Chong's advantage in the fight between the two armies was growing greater and greater, and he had already forced his opponent up the corner. Today, Wang Chong arrived at Ghost Tree District, intending to make his move as he did on any other day, when he suddenly noticed a white-haired elder standing before the golden chessboard. This white-haired elder had a thin build, and he was dressed in a simple black shirt. With his back facing the Chinese scholar tree, he kneeled on the floor with a white stone in his hand as he stared at the chessboard in a daze. Upon seeing this sight, Wang Chong took in a deep breath of air. At that moment, it felt as though the blood in his body froze, and massive shock tremored his soul. Su Zhengchen. Wang Chong's head buzzed furiously, and for an instant, it seemed as though the entire world had darkened. All that was left in it was that ordinary-looking white-haired elder before the giant tree. After nearly 2 months, Wang Chong had finally met the elder who he respected the most and desired strongly to meet, the war god of Great Tang. There was no imposing disposition or intimidating authority to the elder seated before Wang Chong, and he seemed nothing more than an ordinary old man. If Wang Chong hadn't known about the background of the chess match, he would have never imagined that the elder dressed in simple black clothes who was holding onto a white stone in his hand would be the great war god whose name shook the entire Great Tang. Su Zhengchen, an undefeatable legend that had long disappeared in the minds of many. Under the old Chinese scholar tree in the western district of the capital, a normal golden-plated chessboard was the key for this old war god to select his successor. At this moment, all Wang Chong could feel was a warm sensation in his eyes. The very thought that the great war god of Great Tang was seated right before him sent his heart beating furiously in agitation. With the strength of an individual, Su Zhengchen stood against over 10,000 enemies. Even to his last breath, he fought to protect the citizens of Great Tang. His faith was worthy of respect, and from the depths of Wang Chong's heart, this was what he felt. But soon, Wang Chong suppressed all of his emotions. Even though Su Zhengchen's sudden appearance was a good sign, it didn't mean that the other party was willing to hand over his inheritance to him yet. The difficulty of obtaining the art of god and demon obliteration inheritance was definitely at max level. Wang Chong didn't think that he was the only one to have sat before this golden chessboard. There were definitely several talented individuals who were able to triumph over Su Xianxia on the chessboard. Yet none of them were chosen by him in the end. Su Xianxia dared to even disregard the emperor's edict, rejecting the incomparably noble prince without any hesitation. Just by this itself, the difficulty of obtaining the art of god and demon obliteration was unimaginable. And it wasn't by coincidence that this was the case. It was predetermined, and Su Xianxia's character played a large role in it. No one knew what qualities Su Xianxia was looking for in his disciple, and even if he were to accept one, often, it wouldn't be long before he chased the other party out. There were many of such precedents in Wang Chong's previous life. Thus, Wang Chong didn't dare to get belligerent at all. Luring Su Xianxia out was only the first step. What that came next was the true test. Harboring such thoughts, Wang Chong walked over to the Chinese scholar tree. Elder. Wang Chong bowed respectfully before Su Xianxia before sitting at the opposite side of the chessboard. It seemed as though he was just here to attend an ordinary chess match with an ordinary elder. Given the other party's plainclothes and hidden imposing disposition, it was clear that Su Xianxia had sneaked out from the Su residence, and he didn't want anyone to know his true identity. Thus, Wang Chong chose not to act too restrained or polite. At this time, being casual while showing a suitable level of respect would be more appropriate. Su Xianxia didn't say anything. His eyebrows were tightly knitted, and his eyes were fixated on the clash between the black and white stones on the golden-plated chessboard. It almost seemed like he hadn't noticed Wang Chong at all. Big brother, you're incredible. Grandfather has been seated here for an entire day already, and he still doesn't know where he should make his next move. At this time, a slightly childish voice sounded by the side. A chubby child, Dai Jianjian, stood on the right side of Su Xianxia's back, and he was currently licking on a stick of sweet candied haw while staring at Wang Chong in admiration. He might be young, but having watched the chess match here day after day, he had learned a thing or two from them. He could somewhat tell that the big brother he met this time was a formidable player. To think that his grandfather would actually be stumped. Jianer. At this moment, an authoritative voice sounded, and a momentary frown furrowed on Su Xianxia's forehead. Even so, his body remained completely motionless. He continued staring intently at the chessboard with a white stone in his hand. The young boy stuck out his tongue before he walking away. Seeing the sight, Wang Chong smiled before turning his attention to the golden chessboard once more. The layout on the chessboard was exactly as how he left it yesterday. That was to say, from yesterday until now, Su Xianxia had been unable to decide on his next move. Since Su Xianxia hadn't made a move, Wang Chong could only wait patiently. The wind blew, and the Chinese scholar tree rustled slightly under the light breeze. GG. Except for the occasional call of the cicadas, the surroundings were completely tranquil. Su Xianxia didn't say a word, so Wang Chong chose to remain silent as well. It seemed as though the world beneath the Chinese scholar tree had paused. Young man, your way of playing sure is unorthodox. After a long period of time, Su Xianxia finally lifted his gaze, and he looked at Wang Chong with a stern expression. This was the first time Wang Chong was facing Su Xianxia. Su Xianxia was skinny, but that did little to whittle down his authoritative aura that seemed to be embedded deep in his bones. He had a strong air of righteousness to him, but his face was devoid of emotions, giving others an extremely austere impression of him. Also, another thing that Wang Chong noticed was that he had thick snowy eyebrows. It had been many years since Su Xianxia had locked down his residence and stayed away from the royal court and the military. Throughout those years, his disposition had changed a lot. But even so, in his relaxed and ordinary state, Wang Chong could still find traces of the imposing and powerful war god from back then. Of the duo seated beneath the Chinese scholar tree, one was the legendary war god of the past, while the other was the future Grand Marshal of the Central Plains. This chess match was the disciple selection process of the legendary war god, as well as the clash between the older and newer generation of Grand Marshal. Even though Wang Chong knew that he wasn't a match for old Marshal Su in terms of martial arts, He was confident in triumphing over the latter in terms of warfare. Elder, in a battlefield, there's only life and death, victory and loss. There's no such thing as orthodox and unorthodox. Hearing Su Xianxian talk of unorthodox, Wang Chong refuted without restraint. Wang Chong was someone who had lived through that chaotic doomsday, and he had undergone all kinds of small-scale and large-scale battles. Even if his opponent was Su Xianxian, Wang Chong didn't think that he would lose. Su Xianxian frowned slightly, not expecting Wang Chong to speak such words. He had said that Wang Chong's playing style was unorthodox, but Wang Chong went on to apply the game to the military. Chess and military came from the same fabric. From the very start, Go was an offshoot of warfare. Thus, Wang Chong's words weren't without sense. Holding on to the seemingly heavy white stone in his hand, Su Xianxian turned his eyes back to the chessboard, and the entire area fell into silence once more. After a long moment of contemplation, Su Xianxian seemed to have finally thought it through. With a loud thud, the white stone in his hand finally smacked down on the chessboard. Su Xianxian had finally found a way to counterattack. His sudden movement immediately piqued Wang Chong's interest. With a glance, Wang Chong chuckled inwardly. This move from Su Xianxian was indeed an extremely profound and wise move. With this single move, the entire situation on the chessboard seemed to have changed. All of the sudden, it felt that the dragons had risen from their slumber, and the hope of reversing the tides emerged. But Wang Chong could only shake his head after seeing that move. As expected, Wang Chong smiled. He took a black stone and pada. He placed it cleanly on the center of the chessboard. With this smack, the tides on the chessboard changed once more. A moment ago, Su Xianxian seemed to have managed to escape from death, and it almost felt that the tides were reversed with that single move. But with Wang Chong's move, everything crumbled, and the dragons slowly withered away. Su Xianxian's army was collapsing. Beneath the Chinese scholar tree, before the chessboard, a deep crease etched on Su Xianxian's forehead, and a grim expression appeared on his face. In truth, the chess match beneath the Chinese scholar tree was a lowering of his standards so that all talents could give it a try. This way, even those who possessed even the slightest aptitude in warfare could participate and possibly succeed. The thought that this match would blow up into a full-scale war never ever crossed his mind. And even worse, it seemed like it was his loss. This was something he completely out of his expectations. Su Xianxian stared at the desolate sight on the chessboard motionlessly with a grave expression, and it was hard to tell what he was thinking of. "Which clan do you come from?" After a long period of time, Su Xianxian finally raised his head. It wasn't possible for an ordinary clan to cultivate this level of skill in their offsprings. "I am Wang Chong, the son of Great Tang General Wang Yan, the grandson of previous Prime Minister Wang Jiuling." Seated in a kneeling position, Wang Chong replied confidently and respectfully. "Ah, so you're the grandson of Wang Bo Wu." Su Xianxian's eyebrows twitched slightly, but his face remained indifferent. Duke Jiu Wang Jiuling, the previous Prime Minister of Great Tang, was a figure whom no one in the Central Plains didn't know of. Upon speaking of him, there wasn't a single person who wouldn't lift up their thumbs to compliment his noble deeds. But to Su Xianxian, Duke Jiu was a person who he could address by his nickname casually. In fact, it seemed as though he was simply talking about another junior. If it was anyone else, Wang Chong would have thought that he was humiliating Duke Jiu, and he would stand up and leave immediately. However, of the entire Great Tang, there were indeed a few who could address his grandfather in the capacity of a senior, and Su Xianxian was one of them. As the previous war god, Su Xianxian had made his name far earlier than Duke Jiu, and when he was at the peak of his authority, the other party was still an unknown lad. And speaking of age, while grandfather had just passed his 70th birthday not too long ago, he was still significantly younger than the elder sitting before Wang Chong at this moment. Thinking about it now, he seems to be around 80 or 90? Or perhaps even greater. Wang Chong's heart leaped furiously. Grandfather only made his name when he was in his 20s, and by then, Su Xianxian was at least in his 40s already. In other words, Su Xianxian was likely to be in his 90s already. In fact, Wang Chong even suspected that he might have passed the century mark. After all, he was a general during the generation of Emperor Taizong. Even so, it was impossible to tell this much based on Su Jingqian's appearance. Wang Chong lifted his head and briefly examined Su Jingqian. Even though the other party's hair was white, he seemed to be energetic, and his body was still healthy. He didn't look too much older than grandfather. However, different from grandfather, Wang Chong could sense a deeply hidden dark aura from Su Jingqian. The person before him seemed to have sealed himself within his own world, secluding himself from the world outside. Unwilling to speak with others, he avoided social interactions of all sorts. Even for Wang Chong, the only link between them was this golden chessboard. There was no other interaction, and Su Jingqian didn't seem to be interested in it either. Looking at the war god of the Great Tang, Wang Chong suddenly felt empathy. He wasn't foreign to this situation. In his previous life, when he lost everything, he had once descended into this state. There was nothing that could interest him, nothing that he desired. The only reason for him to continue living was to accomplish the mission life had given to him. Su Jingqian is probably the same as well. Wang Chong thought as he recalled the plight of this elder. Su Jingqian had lost his son in his prime, and his grandson in his later years. Everything that he held dear was torn away from him, leaving him alone in this world. Wasn't this similar to how Wang Chong's plight back then? The only difference was that Wang Chong was reincarnated. He gained the opportunity to change destiny and reunite with his family members. But Su Jingqian was different. His only drive at the moment was probably to find a suitable successor and pass down his art of god and demon obliteration. Or perhaps, as the war god of Great Tang, he simply hoped to fulfill his mission of silently protecting his country until his death. He still loved this country, even though Emperor Taizong, whom he served loyally, had left behind an edict preventing any succeeding emperor from using this war god once more, as well as prohibiting him from leading an army, or have any connections with the military ever again. At this, Wang Chong's determination grew stronger. No matter what, he was determined to change the fate of this elder. He wanted to bring him out of his inner seclusion and allow him to live his remaining life happily. He didn't want the tragedy from before to replay, and for this respectable elder to die once again in sorrow and loneliness. Elder, winning and losing is commonplace in war. Why don't we play another match? Chuckling, Wang Chong suddenly asked. Su Jingqian lifted his head, and a slight doubt flashed across his eyes. Wang Chong's attitude seemed to have been a little weird since a while ago. Even so, he didn't reject the offer and nodded in agreement. Soon, the stones on the golden chessboard were cleared, and seated opposite to one another, the duo began on another match. Different from before, they weren't making a single move each day this time around. Rather, they were playing a complete match face-to-face. Su Jingqian intended to make use of the chess formation he set up to pick a successor, but Wang Chong's level seemed to have far surpassed that level. Even he himself wasn't a match. Duh, duh, duh. The entire field slowly grew quiet. The wind blew, and the giant crown of the Chinese scholar tree trembled. Leaf after leaf floated in the air. Some of them fell on the chessboard while some drifted by the sides of the duo. Su Jingqian was a reticent person. After agreeing to Wang Chong's rematch, he sat upright, as though a taut spear stabbed into the ground, reminiscent of a disciplined military man. Wang Chong didn't lose out to Su Jingqian in terms of disposition either. In his previous life, he was the great Grand Marshal of the Central Plains. However, Wang Chong would more or less try to conceal it most of the time. Also, given his physical body of a 15-year-old and his weak cultivation, it was difficult for Wang Chong to fully bring out the disposition belonging to a Grand Marshal as well. Wang Chong even went to the extent of relaxing his body so that the atmosphere wasn't so tense, making it seem like a perfectly ordinary match. Su Jingqian possessed extraordinary talents in warfare, but it was a pity that his opponent was the most talented war saint in the future of the Central Plains. The duo moved their own troops to clash with the opponent on the complicated chessboard. Su Jingqian's army was powerful, but before Wang Chong's troops, they could only fall helplessly. Slowly, Su Jingqian's white stones on the board decreased, while Wang Chong's black stones increased. Su Jingqian devoted all of his wisdom into the chessboard, but it seemed as though Wang Chong always had a net weaved straight in front of him, regardless of where he was heading, waiting for him to charge into it. Unknowingly, Su Xianxia found himself descending into a desperate situation once more. There were very little moves he could make on the chessboard, and Su Xianxia found himself completely surrounded by enemies once more. The wind whistled in the surroundings. Holding a white stone firmly in his hands, Su Xianxia's thick snowy eyebrows knitted tightly together. Staring at the chessboard before him, he fell silent yet again. The entire surroundings became quiet. Wang Chong looked at the chessboard with a slight smile, waiting patiently for Su Xianxia to make his move. Once more, after a long period of time, Su Xianxia put down the stone in his hand and uttered 2 words. This time, he was the one who took the initiative to ask for a rematch. After which, he shut his mouth tightly, not speaking another word. All right, Wang Chong smiled in delight. He quietly kept the pieces and started another match. Then, the horses and infantries of both sides began colliding in that bloody battlefield once more. Unknowingly, the sky set in the west, and the entire Ghost Tree district fell dark. Old master, it's already late. Why don't we return for now and play another day? Suddenly, behind the Chinese scholar tree, an ordinary black-haired old man appeared. With a slightly hunched body, the old man looked at Su Xianxia worriedly. Seeing this skinny old man, Wang Chong felt as though his heart had been pricked by a needle. His eyes narrowed, his body trembled, and his heart beat furiously. He nearly couldn't hold back his shocked exclaim. A past acquaintance. Wang Chong recognized this man. He was Fang Hong, an old servant of the Su residence. He was a child of an old servant of the Su residence, and he grew up there. After Su Xianxia lost his son and grandson, he fired all of the maids and servants, keeping only this loyal old servant by his side to serve him until his death. The reason why Wang Chong recognized him was because this old servant was the one who told him about Su Xianxia's affairs back then. However, Wang Chong soon recovered. Even though he recognized Fang Hong, that old servant couldn't possibly recognize him. Old man. Pushing down his agitation, Wang Chong greeted him with forced nonchalance. This Fang Hong looked much younger than Wang Chong how he remembered him. Back then, the other party's hair was already completely white, and the marks of time was etched on his face. Also, different from the loyal old servant who couldn't get over the sorrow of losing his master, the current Fang Hong was still lively. Wang Chong couldn't help but feel happy for him. At the very least, that tragedy had yet to happen. Elder, it's already late. I have to return now. Why don't we fight it out tomorrow? Wang Chong smiled at Su Xianxia. Upon Fang Hong's reminder, Wang Chong suddenly recalled a matter. Su Xianxia restricted himself to a rule. Regardless of whether it was to play chess or do anything else, he had to return to the Su residence before sunset. Otherwise, if a patrolling Imperial Army member were to notice him and report back to the royal palace, it might cause a huge uproar. Su Xianxia was unwilling to bring the attention of that person in the royal palace onto him. After all, if that happened, everyone would notice him. For so many years, ever since the time of Emperor Taizong, Su Xianxia had been keeping a low profile, and that was how he had lived until now. This had already become an instinctive habit. Even though Wang Chong did not approve of it, there was nothing he could do at this moment. It was his first time meeting the other party, and given the limited time they had spent together, even if he wanted to advise him to kick this habit, that would have to be a thing for the future. Su Xianxia looked at Wang Chong silently before glancing at the chessboard. On the complicated chessboard, the white stones were forced to scatter under the onslaught of the black stones. He had lost this match as well. To think that a war god who had dominated the battlefield would lose to a teenager. Just the very thought of it felt inconceivable. But it had happened right before him. Wang Chong's fight it out tomorrow had managed to achieve a good tone, leaving the other party with some dignity. After glancing deeply into Wang Chong momentarily, Su Xianxia finally stood up. Fang Hong, let's go. After which, Su Xianxia flung his sleeves slightly, turned around, and left slowly. Staring at Su Xianxia's departing figure, Wang Chong smiled. Then, he got up and left as well. It takes more than one cold day for a river to freeze 3 feet deep. To open up a closed heart wasn't an easy matter. Wang Chong's intentions of having Su Zhengqian step out from the eerie and sinister Su residence wasn't something that could be achieved in a short period of time. However, there was always a first step in everything. By accumulating bits and pieces, one might pile up a mountain one day. Thus, the second day, Wang Chong headed to the Ghost Tree District once more. A golden chessboard was placed beneath a Chinese scholar tree, and behind the chessboard sat a familiar figure. Snowy white hair and black plain clothes. He sat motionlessly in the midst of the morning wind. He seemed to have waited for quite a period of time already. "Elder, good morning." Wang Chong headed over delightfully and sat opposite to Su Zhengqian. "Hurry! Come here." Wang Chong beckoned to his back, and a few guards immediately walked over with a small table, and they placed it by the chessboard. Then, they placed a small plate of peanuts and 2 pairs of exquisite chopsticks on top of the small table. "What's this?" Frowning, Su Zhengqian took a momentary glance at the small table before staring at Wang Chong doubtfully. "It's peanuts." Wang Chong chuckled with a surprised look spelling, "It can't be that you don't even recognize peanuts," on his face. Su Zhengqian didn't say anything, but his frown deepened. "Ha ha ha, Elder, so you're talking about this. Don't you think that it's too boring to just be playing chess? Isn't it good to have some snacks by the side as well? Come, here's your chopsticks." Wang Chong grinned, as though he had only just understood the meaning behind the other party's gesture. Change always starts gradually, and the only intention Wang Chong had in mind now was to make the elder before him happy. He was the war god of the Great Tang, and for this empire, for the Central Plains and all of its population, he had offered his entire life. Such a person deserved to be happy. The world owed him way too much. Wang Chong did want to obtain the art of god and demon obliteration, but more than that, he hoped that this noble elder could spend his late years in happiness. And this plate of peanut was just the start. Wang Chong believed that one day, he could help this elder to walk out from his shadows and bring a smile to his face. The entire surrounding was silent, except for the occasional rustling of the leaves. Su Zhengqian stared at Wang Chong hesitantly, but eventually, he chose not to say anything. Even until the very end, Su Zhengqian didn't eat the peanuts that Wang Chong brought. Even so, the fact that he allowed Wang Chong to bring it to the chessboard was already a huge improvement. Once it had started, there was no stopping it anymore. Ever since Su Zhengqian chose not to stop Wang Chong, the entire matter spiraled out of control. The second day, Wang Chong brought a plate of braised beef. The third day, Wang Chong brought a few plates of side dishes. And on the fourth, Wang Chong finally brought a bottle of wine. "What's this?" Su Zhengqian finally came to the limit of his tolerance. A deep crease sat on his forehead, indicating his displeasure. He seemed to abhor alcohol a lot. Su Zhengqian had seen many powerful figures in his life, be it Emperor Taizong, the monk living in the great snowy mountains in the western Yusang, the northern Turkic Khan of the sacred lands of the sun, as well as the various generals and powerful officials from Goguryeo, Abbasid Caliphate, Karak Spazinu, and many other countries. But none of them dared to act so rowdily before him. At the very least, none of them was as carefree as Wang Chong. The peanut on the first day was one thing, and he could still overlook the braised beef on the second day. However, what he brought afterward was getting more and more overboard. Putting aside the various side dishes, he even brought alcohol here today. What that should have been a tranquil and refined chess match suddenly changed in tone due to Wang Chong's actions. "It's wine." Seemingly oblivious to Su Zhengqian's displeasure, Wang Chong replied casually. As he said so, he placed a wine cup right before Su Zhengqian and poured some wine into it. "I don't drink." Su Zhengqian frowned, not even sparing a glance at the cup of wine Wang Chong offered him. "Drinking causes inefficiency. As the offspring of a clan of generals, shouldn't you understand this logic?" Su Zhengqian's eyes were cold. Even though it had been several decades since he had handed over the military right of the empire and stepped away from the center of authority, he still persisted on the habits he had cultivated in the military during the former half of his life. He didn't mind Wang Chong bringing peanuts and braised beef, but alcohol was a huge taboo. "Hee, elder, you are jesting with me again. I am just a child, and you aren't a general in the battlefield either." Why would there be any inefficiencies? Wang Chong replied casually. Su Zhengxin's eyes were extremely cold. The authority he exerted came from his years of commanding troops, and it wasn't something that an ordinary person could withstand. If it was anyone else, he would have already shuddered in fear. However, Wang Chong seemed to be completely impervious to it. On top of that, he even drank a cup of wine in the midst of his words. It was refreshing and light. After drinking his cup, he grabbed a piece of fleshy braised beef and slowly chewed on it in his mouth. Su Zhengxin froze a moment, and he suddenly came to a realization. Indeed, it had been such a long time that he had already forgotten. He was no longer the Grand Marshal of the military, and he didn't have anything to do with it anymore. What efficiency did the current him have to worry about? Suddenly, Su Zhengxin fell into a daze. Until now, he could still remember the orders Emperor Taizong issued for him to strip his armor and hand over his military authority. It had become a sharp thorn lodged deeply within his heart. Elder, it's fine if you don't wish to drink it. At this moment, Wang Chong suddenly spoke up. If you lose 3 fewer points than yesterday, I'll let you off. Otherwise, you'll have to drink a cup. What do you think about it? Atrocious. Su Zhengxin's face changed, and the authority of an ex-war god instinctively flowed out from him. Even though the times had changed, how could he change a habit he had cultivated over dozens of years all of a sudden? Grandfather, you're playing cheat. If you lose, you should take your punishment willingly. At this moment, a childish voice sounded from the side. A chubby boy ran out from behind, grabbed Su Zhengxin's arms, and swung it with all of his might relentlessly. The authority that leaked out from Su Zhengxin immediately collapsed. For some reason, when he first met this child several months ago, he felt connected with him. Since then, this child had also brought him some joy in life. Before this child, he couldn't pull his weight at all. All right, I agree to it, all right? With his hands swung vigorously, Su Zhengxin could only agree to it helplessly. He was exceptionally fond of Dai Jianjian, and as for Wang Chong, this child's aptitude in warfare truly impressed him. In his entire life, he had never seen anyone as talented as Wang Chong. It was to the point that he wasn't a match for this child at all. Toward these two children, he couldn't toughen up his heart. Setting out the chessboard, the stones clashed with one another. A few hours later, the white stones, as usual, were forced to a corner. For the past few days, Su Zhengxin had lost tragically to Wang Chong consecutively, and it was of no exception today. Looking at the board, Su Zhengxin's face paled, and eventually he sighed deeply. Grabbing the wine cup on the table, he gulped it down. Perhaps it was because he had abstained from alcohol for the past few decades. He choked on this mouthful. His entire face turned red, and he coughed several times. Upon seeing this sight, little Jianjian burst into laughter. He felt that this big brother was an interesting person. Wang Chong couldn't help but chuckle as well. Once the gears had started turning, it couldn't be stopped anymore. Even though Wang Chong had brought many snacks the past few days, the ex-war god didn't touch them at all. But with this gulp of wine, everything would change. In the distance, under an inconspicuous roof, the old servant, Fang Hong, smiled upon seeing this sight. It had been a long time since he had seen such an expression on the old master. Choked on the alcohol, Su Zhengxin's face flushed red. However, at this moment, Fang Hong could sense that the sorrowful aura that had accompanied him for many years was fading. For some reason, Fang Hong found himself extremely fond of that youngster named Wang Chong and that 4-year-old child. Wang Chong's judgment was spot on. After drinking that cup of wine, it was as if a barrier had been shattered. The control that Su Zhengxin had been imposing on himself was destroyed. In the next few days, Su Zhengxin would occasionally pick up a few pieces of peanut, a few slices of beef, few side dishes, and drink a mouthful or two of wine. Even though it wasn't much, he seemed much more casual than before. The atmosphere also wasn't as tense as before. This was a positive change. Seeing that the elder he respected was finally able to put down some of his sorrows, Wang Chong felt happy for him. Day after day passed, but Su Zhengxin still didn't reveal his identity. At the same time, Wang Chong didn't point anything out either. Every single day, The elder and the youngster would sit beneath the Chinese scholar tree, and they would play chess like anyone else. During this period of time, Wang Chong came into contact with Uncle Li Lin, and upon hearing that the saber was sold for 300,000 gold taels, he was astounded. Wang Chong didn't think that the Death's Abyss could be sold for such a fearsome figure. This strengthened Wang Chong's resolution to walk the high-end route. This 300,000 gold taels also helped to fill up Wang Chong's treasury, which was already running low. However, there was still no progress on the matter regarding the demonic emperor old man. No matter how many men Wang Chong sent, there wasn't any result. Wang Chong, what are you doing? Stand like a tree, sit like a bell. One should be disciplined in his actions. How can you behave so casually? Su Zhengchen frowned in displeasure. Wang Chong seemed to be becoming more and more casual before him. A while ago he had only brought some alcohol, but now even his sitting posture had changed. He began to play while lying down. Ha ha ha! The purpose of life is happiness. Don't allow your wine cup to face the moon emptily. What's the use of restricting yourself so much? Being happy is enough. Wang Chong chuckled happily, not paying it any heed. Since Su Zhengchen didn't reveal his identity, Wang Chong was also content to act ignorant. Otherwise, if Su Zhengchen were to flash out his identity as the ex-war god, he wouldn't be able to behave so casually anymore. Su Zhengchen frowned, but he didn't say anything. Instead, he turned his attention back to the chessboard. On the golden chessboard, the white stones were on the verge of collapsing once more. Cough! 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 Suddenly, a series of violent coughing sounded. While the duo was immersed in the game, little Jian sneaked to the little table Wang Chong brought, and he gobbled a slice of braised beef and drank a small mouthful of wine. The braised beef was nothing much, but when drinking the wine Wang Chong brought, Jian choked and coughed violently. Cough, cough, cough. Bad, it tastes bad. The charcoal wine from the eastern city's Zhou clan is better. Little Jian patted his chest as he said with a bitter expression. Upon seeing this sight, Wang Chong and Su Zhengchen couldn't help but chuckle. Little fellow, who told you to drink it without permission? Su Zhengchen reprimanded. However, his eyes were filled with affection, as though he was looking at his own grandson. Indeed, at your age, you should be taking on good habits instead of learning how to drink. Wang Chong reprimanded with a smile as well. However, the next instant, his mind suddenly jolted. For a brief moment, Wang Chong fell into a daze. Little fellow, what did you just say? Wang Chong suddenly stared at little Jian intently. It felt as though something that the other party said had jolted him, and some memories that had sunk deep in his mind were about to float to the surface. Humph! I said that your wine is bad. Little Jian crossed his arms in displeasure. Not that, the other one. Wang Chong asked anxiously. The other one? The charcoal wine from the eastern city's Zhou clan? You think that I've never drunk it? Humph, that's not true. Hong long long. It felt as though a bolt of lightning had flashed across Wang Chong's mind. His entire body trembled, and suddenly, a memory flashed across him. Eastern city's Zhou clan? Eastern city's Zhou clan. That's right. How did I forget about it? Suddenly, Wang Chong's heart started beating furiously in agitation. He suddenly recalled the details regarding the demonic emperor old man, and the expert with mediocre talent who used the great Yin-Yang world creation art. That's right. That rich clan that hired the expert back then was the Eastern city's Zhou clan. He had only heard this name by chance several times in the past, but that was definitely it. In fact, Wang Chong even recalled hearing that the Eastern city's Zhou clan had a specialty wine which was a household name among the ordinary civilians, even though it wasn't well known among the larger clans. That wine was known as the Zhou clan's charcoal wine. By finding the Eastern city's Zhou clan, he would be able to track down that young expert and locate the whereabouts of the demonic emperor old man. In this instant, Wang Chong suddenly saw a ray of hope. Delight gushed through his heart. Amidst Su Zhengchen and little Jian's surprised gazes, Wang Chong left. Before his departure, Su Zhengchen had lost tragically to Wang Chong once more, and the white stones on the chessboard were scattered sparsely around the place. This made a deep, to furrow on the ex-war god's forehead. After leaving the Ghost Tree District, Wang Chong headed straight for the city's east before asking a few passers-by for directions. Even though the nobility in Great Tang Empire knew very little about the charcoal wine, it was a famous product among ordinary civilians. In just a short moment, Wang Chong arrived at the entrance of the Zhou clan's brewery. The gigantic courtyard was surrounded by a fence, and on the fence, a long flagpole stood taut. Written in black on a red background was, "Zhouji's charcoal wine." The flag drifted along with the wind, and from afar, one could vaguely see a few black spots on the red background. Clearly, it had several years to it by now. Given how the boss didn't change their flag for such a long period of time, he must have been very proud of his specialty. So this is where that person works. Half a street away from the Zhou clan's brewery, a carriage stopped. Parting the window lace, Wang Chong gazed through the window to look at the Zhou clan's brewery with unspeakable emotions in his heart. Wang Chong had heard quite a few things regarding that person, and he knew that he worked for a wealthy clan. But even so, he couldn't help but feel agitated upon seeing his working place for the first time. If not for little Jian unintentionally bringing the matter up after sneakily drinking some wine, Wang Chong might have never remembered it. "Gongzi, we've checked on it. There's indeed a person named Zhou Wen here." At this moment, the carriage door opened, and a Wang clan guard walked in respectfully. "I've asked around, and everyone inside knows him. He was born into a destitute family, and he has a mother at home to provide for. To date, he has already worked for the Zhou clan for several years now. He is an honest and reticent person. He keeps a low profile in the factory, but due to his diligence, his coworkers have a favorable impression of him." Wang Chong nodded. This was completely aligned with what he knew of that man. The Zhou, when before 27-year-old, was no different from an ordinary man. Despite his lack of talent, he made it up with his diligence to provide for him and his family. What that truly changed his fate was the appearance of the mysterious demonic Emperor Old Man. It was the demonic Emperor Old Man who turned that mediocre and amiable young man into the respected expert in the future. "Have you asked when he gets off work?" Seated in the carriage, Wang Chong asked. "I've asked. To prepare food for his mother, he would always return on time. To make up for it, he often arrives at work much earlier than the others. He would wake up before 5 to prepare food for his mother before heading to the Zhou clan brewery to start working. When others start work, he would have already worked for 4 hours already. Even though he got off work early, his working hours are actually much longer than the others. On top of that, he's extremely diligent. Single-handedly, he does the work rivaling 2 to 3 people. As such, the Zhou clan is delighted to keep him as well." With a lowered head, the guard explained the situation in great details. Everyone in the Wang clan knew that the current young master was different from before. After the matter at the Four-Quarter Embassy, there were rumors that of the entire Wang clan, the one most likely to succeed the old master's position was this young child. As such, the guards treated this young master with utmost respect, not daring to be negligent in whatever that was entrusted to them. "You've worked hard." Wang Chong nodded before closing his eyes to wait patiently. After a seemingly long period of time, the gates to the Zhou clan's brewery opened, and a tall figure walked out. "Hey, Zhou Wen. Zhou Wen is here. Are you returning home to prepare food? Haha. Hurry along. We'll settle the matters here." Outside the Zhou clan's brewery, a commotion sounded. Wang Chong abruptly opened his eyes and looked out of the window, only to see a tall silhouette standing at the entrance, smiling honestly at the group back at the brewery. "It's him." The thought flashed across Wang Chong's head. Zhou Wen, who had just got off work, wasn't as brawny, tanned, or scruffy as Wang Chong expected. Rather, he was dressed in a gray robe, and he had a clean and tidy appearance. He had washed his face beforehand, and a clean glow radiated from his skin. Instead of a worker in a brewery, he felt more like an academic instead. Zhou Wen also had a tall stature. Standing at nearly 6 chi, he towered over the other workers. Even so, his simple character and honest smile allowed him to mix in perfectly with the other workers of the brewery. Wang Chong could tell that the other workers were extremely fond of this tall lad. After waving the other workers goodbye one by one, Zhou Wen placed a baggage on his back and started walking back home. "Follow him," Wang Chong said. The carriage slowly followed behind Zhou Wen at a steady pace, maintaining an appropriate distance so as to not alarm him. The sun gradually set, and perhaps fearful that his mother was starving, Zhou Wen walked swiftly. Even though his walking pace seemed normal, his speed was almost equivalent to the jogging pace of an ordinary person. Wang Chong followed Zhou Wen through the streets until the latter started walking through the alleys. As the alleys were too narrow for the carriage to pass through, Wang Chong abandoned the carriage without any hesitation. Even though it was slightly inconvenient, it was easier to conceal himself this way. Following behind him, Wang Chong saw him turn around the corner, take out a copper coin, and place it into the bowl of a blind beggar. Then, at the remnants of a wall fencing a banyan tree, Zhou Wen took out the lunch that he didn't bear to eat from his baggage and fed it to a few pigeons with a bright smile on his face. Seeing this sight from afar, many emotions ran through Wang Chong's heart. Back then, he once saw Zhou Wen from afar. The other party's face was stiff, and there wasn't the slightest smile on his face. It seemed as though he had lost his soul, driven only by some compelling purpose. It was clear that he was unhappy with a single glance. For those who had seen Zhou Wen state then, seeing him smile so happily over simple matters like this was unimaginable. Strength isn't everything. There were some who were willing to swap their entire world for strength, but similarly, there were also some who were willing to swap strength for an entire world. Wang Chong believed that if that man then saw this sight, he would definitely trade everything he had for this. What's that fellow doing? He's moving faster and faster. He started running. Did he notice us? Suddenly, a panicked voice sounded by Wang Chong's ears. The guards stared into the distance in shock. Zhou Wen had always been walking at a steady pace, but after feeding the pigeons, he started moving faster and faster, to the point that he even started running. It seemed as though he had noticed something, and he was trying his best to get them off his trail. He has wasted too much time on the way back, so he's trying to rush back home to prepare food for his mother. Wang Chong explained calmly. The guards were astonished by Wang Chong's explanation. Look at the sky. His mother would surely be starving by now. Wang Chong pointed out. The guards were stunned. Lifting their heads, they realized that it was already dark. Unknowingly, it was already time for dinner. Wang Chong didn't think too much about it. He simply widened his strides and followed behind Zhou Wen. Due to his superior cultivation, it was impossible for him to be slower than Zhou Wen. Treading through alley after alley behind Zhou Wen, Wang Chong eventually saw him enter a short and shabby mud horse which had a thick layer of straw covering its roof. The house stood silently amidst the darkness, and there were no other residences within dozens of zhang of this cottage. It felt as though it was isolated from the entire world. Mother! Wunner! Cough cough! A slightly old voice accompanied with several pained coughs sounded from the narrow and small house. A moment later, a dim oil lamp lit up, then a series of ding-ding-dang-dang, the sound of washing and cutting, echoed in the room. Standing beneath a lush camphor tree, Wang Chong soon caught the fragrance of a meal. Mother, dinner is ready. Zhou Wen's respectful voice sounded. A moment later, the windows opened, and black smoke drifted out. At the same moment, Wang Chong saw Zhou Wen carrying 2 plates of side dishes out. 2 chopsticks, 2 small bowls, and a dim oil lamp in the center of the table. On one side sat Zhou Wen, and on the other a silver-haired and skinny old lady. She kept placing food into the Zhou Wen's bowl, and from time to time, she would turn to the side to cough. Child, eat some more, eat some more. Upon seeing this sight, Wang Chong felt his nose sour slightly. An indescribable feeling welled up in him. In that instant, Wang Chong suddenly realized what this man lost back then. This man was an honest and humble man. He didn't harbor great ambitions. There were many stories about the background of this man back then, but none of them spoke a thing about his mother. He was a filial son. He could wake up at 5 every morning to work, and despite taking on the load of 2 workers, he could still smile in front of the dinner table with his wearied body. All of these were because he had a mother whom he cared for. But by the time he became the hero that everyone respected, he had already lost everything. He was already alone in this world. He lost the most important thing he held dearly in this world. Wang Chong suddenly recalled a rumor he had heard very long ago. It was said that the reason why this man's character suddenly became callous was because his mother was killed by a bunch of violent ruffians. This news came from nowhere, and it only reached the ears of a few. It didn't take long for it to be completely forgotten. As such, Wang Chong didn't pay much heed to it either. However, at this moment, Wang Chong suddenly realized that it wasn't a coincidence. Most probably, his meeting with the demonic emperor old man might have been the impetus for this matter. This filial son couldn't have possibly incurred the wrath of violent ruffians. The only possibility could only be his meeting with the demonic emperor old man. The life-changing opportunity for one might just be a plain disaster for another. At this point, Wang Chong couldn't help but sigh deeply. "Young master!" Suddenly, footsteps sounded from behind. Dressed in a black robe, Xianxia walked over from the depths of the shadows. "I've already checked, and there hasn't been any peculiar old man appearing in the vicinity recently. No one else has appeared in this house either," Xianxia said. There were a few other Wang family residence guards following behind him. For this operation, the guards had split into two groups. One was led by Wang Chong while the other one was led by Xianxia. Even though they came by different routes following different clues, they eventually converged at this location. "Seems like the demonic emperor old man hasn't appeared yet," Wang Chong thought as he stared at the starry sky above. Initially, Wang Chong thought that he might be a little too late for this operation. If the demonic emperor old man had already found Zhou Wen, then that would be the worst-case scenario. But from the looks of it, even though Wang Chong had noticed the clue a little late, it seemed like the incident hadn't occurred yet. In other words, he still stood a chance. "For the next few days, you all will follow him. Deploy all of the guards in the Wang family residence for this and take note of every single action of his. Also, inform Wei Hao of the matter and borrow some men from their side for this operation as well," Wang Chong said. "However, if we were to deploy all of the guards from the residence for this operation, what if another assassination occurs?" Xianxia frowned. "If not for Arloja, Ablonidin, and Tuoba Guyuan, the Carrick Spazinu assassins might have successfully gotten in then." Madame Wang was still living in the residence, and her safety had to be considered. "Don't worry, I've already informed Mayasame Ayaka to return." Wang Chong smiled. Given that the assassin pavilion had been cleared out, there was nothing that could threaten the Wang clan now. Besides, he had Li Zhuxin by his side as well. During this period of time, he just had to keep Li Zhuxin in the residence. One will remain in the open while the other one hides in the dark. On top of that, Arloja, Ablonidin, and Tuoba Guyuan will be there as well. Even though there will only be 5 people there, the Wang family residence could be considered as an impregnable fortress already. No one who tries to enter will be able to get out alive. "Right? Have you all got any news on that Mosade yet?" Wang Chong asked. "Not yet." Xianxia shook his head. "We've already questioned the other Carrick Spazinu merchants via Big Golden Tooth, and there isn't anyone called Mosade among them. However, there is a person named Suleiman who happens to be a close fit to our description." "Suleiman?" Wang Chong eyebrows twitched. "You said that his name is Suleiman?" "Yes, young master. However, based on the news we got, he has already left the capital for Carrick Spazinu about a month ago." Thinking that Wang Chong didn't catch his words clearly, Xianxia repeated. Silence drifted across the dark night, and Wang Chong gazed at the skies with a bizarre expression. An inexplicable feeling welled within his heart. He had no doubt that the assassination that night was the doing of Carrick Spazinu merchant, Mosade. Wang Chong wasn't clear about what kind of person Mosade was, but as for Suleiman, if Wang Chong remembered clearly, he was the fellow who brought the Wuxia steel to the Central Plains and sold it for an astronomical sum in his previous life. Currently, the Hyderabad ores had just barely surfaced, and Carrick Spazinu and Abbasid Caliphate should still be incapable of forging true Wuxia steel weapons yet. The time wasn't ripe yet, but Suleiman had appeared in the Central Plains and attended the sales Wang Chong conducted at the Bluebottle Pavilion. For a person who would bring wood steel to the Central Plains in the future to be buying wood steel from the Central Plains instead, even going to the extent of dispatching assassins to steal it, destiny was indeed a mystical and unfathomable thing. Humph! You sure escaped fast. A faint but bizarre smile slowly spread on Wang Chong's face. Suleiman didn't come to sell the wood steel sword in the Central Plains just to boost the strength of the Central Plains. Wang Chong knew that the sales was just a cover. In truth, that fellow had another mission: intelligence gathering. In the future war between the Abbasid Caliphate and Great Tang, the intelligence Suleiman provided played a crucial role. However, this fellow was simply too cunning. Even Wang Chong didn't expect him to have sneaked into Great Tang long before the sales of the wood steel sword, even assuming the identity of Mosaid for it. In his previous life, Wang Chong was an ordinary profligate scion. While he had heard of Suleiman, he never met him, so how could he had known? Besides, this fellow was extremely wary. As soon as the slightest sign of danger appeared before him, he would escape immediately, not granting anyone the chance to capture him. It wasn't without a reason that this fellow was able to become the chief spy of the Abbasid Caliphate and Karak Spazinu in the future. It'll be your death date the next time I see you. A cold glint flashed across Wang Chong's eyes, and he soon dumped this matter to the back of his head. Dealing with Suleiman was a matter for the future. What was important now was the demonic Emperor Old Man. In Wang Chong's plan, the great Yin-Yang heaven creation art played a crucial role. Without this divine technique, it would be impossible for Wang Chong to reach the same level as he did back then in just a few years' time. Without unparalleled martial arts and cultivation, it would be difficult for him to even interfere in the war that would shake the entire world, needless to say, change destiny. Thus, the great Yin-Yang heaven creation art was something he had to obtain. If he were to obtain both the great Yin-Yang heaven creation art and Elder Su Jingqian's art of God and demon obliteration, and complement their flaws with the might of the other, he would be able to become one of the top experts in the world swiftly. These two techniques were the two most important rings in Wang Chong's plan after his reincarnation. Only with the support of the overwhelmingly powerful great Yin-Yang heaven creation art would the art of God and demon obliteration gain the strength to destroy everything standing before its path. And only when the great Yin-Yang heaven creation art was complemented with the art of God and demon obliteration would it be able to bring out its true fearsome might. However, to obtain the both of them simultaneously was simply too difficult. In his previous life, no one had succeeded in doing so. To most, this thought was so ludicrous that none dared to consider the possibility. However, this was the only option Wang Chong had. This was the only way that he could surpass the limits he faced in his previous life and accomplish what he failed in then. Shanghai, there's a matter that I would like to entrust you with, Wang Chong said. Young master, feel free to speak. Shanghai replied without any hesitation. Tell Wei how to negotiate with the head of the Zhou clan, and regardless of what method he uses, make sure to poach Zhou Wen over to his business. Give him a job with a generous wage so that he can treat his mother. On top of that, send a few guards to protect him from the dark so that he can live the rest of his life in peace. Wang Chong instructed. Zhou Wen was a ticking bomb. He and the demonic Emperor Old Man seemed to be linked together by destiny. If Wang Chong didn't drive away Zhou Wen, then no matter how many guards he sent, no matter how hard he tried to hinder the two of them from meeting, a lapse in their prevention might still occur somewhere, resulting in the eventual fate of Zhou Wen saving the demonic Emperor Old Man. If so, the tragedy from his previous life would replay once more. The demonic Emperor Old Man would die after passing on all of his strength and the great Yin-Yang heaven creation art to Zhou Wen. On the other hand, Zhou Wen's saving of the demonic Emperor Old Man would result in the death of his mother, and from there on, Zhou Wen would be forced into the callous and bloodied pugilistic world. Eventually, due to his gentleness, mediocre talent, and lacking battle experience, the very same tragedy would replay. To some people, this kind of opportunity was something that they craved for, but for the others, it was nothing more than a nightmare. Zhou Wen wasn't capable of driving the great Yin-Yang heaven creation art, and he wasn't suited for it as well. Only in Wang Chong's hands would it be able to display its full might. Zhou Wen would be able to obtain what he desired, a peaceful and content life with his mother, and he wouldn't have to engage in the murder that he abhorred. At the same time, through obtaining the great Yin-Yang heaven creation art, Wang Chong would be able to accomplish his mission. This was the best arrangement. Shanhai was perplexed. Zhou Wen was a filial child, so he could understand why Wang Chong wanted to help him. However, he couldn't understand why Wang Chong would assign 2 guards to him. What in the world did this Zhou Wen possess for the young master to value him so highly? Shanhai felt more and more bewildered. Even so, he agreed to it without any hesitation. Yes, young master. I'll have it done right now. Without wasting a word, Shanhai walked away to complete the task asked of him after making all of the necessary arrangements. Wang Chong dived into the carriage and left quietly, not alarming anyone in the surroundings at all. Clan head. This is the last superior or that our Zhang clan possess. All that are left are of inferior quality. Furthermore, our final mine is about to be dug out in at most 3 months. Just as Wang Chong was leaving the eastern city, a discussion was going on in the Zhang clan residence. A group of the core elders of the Zhang clan sat in a circle with creases furrowed deeply into their foreheads. What that was placed before them was the final piece of top-quality unprocessed ore they brought over from the mine. This ore reflected the current circumstances of the Zhang clan. All of their ore mines were about to be dug out, and regarding the sales of their weapon, they also met with the oppression from the Chang, Lu, Huang, and the other swordsmithing clans. The glorious Zhang clan was already a thing of the past, and currently, it was already forced up a corner under all of the pressure on them. If the Zhang clan wanted to resolve this crisis, they had to find a new large-scale mine. However, how could finding a mine be something easy? Almost all of the existing mines had an owner, and most of them were in the hands of the other swordsmithing clans. The Zhang clan did consider developing a new large-scale mine of their own, but this matter wasn't as easy as it seemed. Ores were hidden deep underground, and to accurately locate a mine within the humongous central plains was no different from finding a needle in the vast ocean. Furthermore, it was an uncertainty whether there was truly an undiscovered mine out there for them to uncover. After all, the central plains had a long history behind it, and almost all possible locations had already been looked into. Besides, there were various stringent conditions to the geography for one to successfully develop a mine. Just because there was an ore deposit didn't mean that one could necessarily mine it. Clan head, I feel that we should negotiate with Chong Gongzi of the Wang clan. Even if we don't earn any monetary incentive from working with him, I believe that we'll benefit from a partnership. The wood steel sword is currently standing at the peak of all weapons, and if we manage to procure wood steel, we'll surely be able to suppress all of the other clans. This way, we'll have sufficient time to look for a suitable mine without worrying about our market share being stolen by the Chang, Huang, and Lu clan. One of the elders suggested. To the swordsmithing clans, superior ore wasn't just money. It was their lifeline. The moment a clan lacked superior ores, its market share would immediately plummet. It would be impossible for the other clans to not exploit this opportunity. The moment a clan lost its market share, it would be difficult to regain it. What all of the swordsmithing clans were vying for was market share. Furthermore, this matter had a chain reaction. Once the market share of a clan plummeted, the swordsmiths in the clan would become idle. They would then leave the clan to join another faction. If such a situation were to occur, the clan would have truly fallen into decline. It would be for naught even if the clan still possessed a large sum of money. Money was just like flowing water. Without a steady income, it would be emptied out quickly. The Zhang clan was one of the oldest swordsmithing clans, and having experienced such dangers before, they were extremely familiar with it, so they feared it greatly. They didn't wish to experience it once more. This was also the reason why everyone was gathered here today. The danger had already reached an unimaginable level, and it would blow up in 3 months at latest. Before this, they had to find a solution. It's no use. Before the matter at the Bluebottle Pavilion, we might still stand a chance. However, you all should know that he sold a saber in the Imperial Army for 300,000 gold taels. With such profit, how could he be willing to share it with us? Plump elder objected. These words sent everyone into silence. The Wuxia steel sword had already become a legend in the Central Plains. Despite the standard market price of around 600 to 700 gold taels for a single top-notch sword, Wang Chong managed to sell a saber for 300,000 gold taels. To the prestigious clans, this was completely unimaginable. Just the thought of it placed immense pressure on their shoulders. Before the incident at the Blue Bottle Pavilion, Wang Chong was just an unknown figure. Everyone in the room could be considered as his seniors. But now, this 15-year-old youngster, along with his Wuxia steel and forging techniques, had become a towering mountain to them, an existence that they couldn't comprehend and could only look up to. Actually, this matter isn't completely impossible. Suddenly, a voice sounded, grasping everyone's attention in an instant. Zhang Jian? What do you intend to say? Everyone immediately turned to look at Zhang Jian. Speaking of the third son of the Wang clan, Zhang Jian and Zhang Cong were the first to come into contact with him, so they had the most authority in this aspect. Haven't you all realized yet? Until now, we haven't heard any news on him buying a forge or him working with anyone. Furthermore, even though his Wuxia steel sword managed to fetch an astronomical sum, he can only produce one per month. Zhang Cong spoke slowly. Go on. The head of the Zhang clan looked at Zhang Jian and Zhang Cong with a contemplative look. What I mean is that even though it has been a long time since the Wuxia steel became famous, he's still working as an individual. The Wuxia steel is a lucrative business, and if a clan could support him, his burden would be eased. In other words, this is an opportunity for our Zhang clan. Zhang Jian revealed what was on his mind. How could a single swordsmith match up to the efficiency of a swordsmithing clan? He doesn't have much experience in this field, so he would surely require help on many aspects, be it looking for swordsmiths, the location for the forge, and many other things. We can these terms as a leverage for a partnership. I believe that as long as we show sufficient sincerity, there's no reason for Chong Gongzi would reject a partnership. Upon hearing those words, everyone fell into contemplation. Even though Zhang Jian's words made sense, the matter regarding the Wuxia steel sword wasn't as easy as it seemed. Every single Wuxia steel sword could potentially fetch up to several 100,000 gold taels. Why would anyone be willing to split the profit? In any case, if it was them, they would definitely reject all partnerships. However, left with no choice, they could only pin their hopes on this slim chance. It was just a matter of time before their minds were dug out, and news would start spreading soon. Or perhaps it might have already reached the ears of others. At the very least, this matter was worth giving it a shot. Zhang Jian, what do you need then? I require the clan head to grant me the privilege to negotiate freely. All right, I'll give you the permission to make decisions on behalf of the clan. As long as it isn't overboard, there's no need for you to report the negotiation to me. The head of the Zhang clan replied gravely. Yes, clan head. Zhang Jian was delighted. In the Wang family residence, Wang Chong was seated in his study, and placed on the table before him was a deed. Under his instructions, Meng Long had led a team to search the mountains around the spirit vein and dug at the potential locations of an ore deposit. Eventually, after spending a huge amount of manpower, resources, and time, they finally found the ore deposit in Wang Chong's memory at 20 li northwest of the spirit vein. He then spent another 80,000 gold taels to buy the entire mountain of the ore deposit at the Court of Judicial Review. And thus, Wang Chong earned himself another huge fortune. However, accruing money wasn't Wang Chong's motive. Wang Chong didn't intend to use this mine to earn money. A war was a battle of resources as much as it was a battle of manpower. Every single war machine counted in a battle, and Wang Chong intended to use this massive mine to build himself gigantic war machines. Under the circumstances that both armies were equal in terms of strength, the one that was better armed would possess a huge advantage. This could be clearly seen by the might of the Abbasid Caliphate army equipped with Wuxia steel in his previous life. Those who analyze more in advance tend to be the winner, whereas those who analyze less tend to lose. Since that is the case, less needs to be said about those who don't analyze at all. This is one of the adages on Sun Tzu's Art of War. A battle has already begun long before it is fought. No one knew more clearly than Wang Chong how many huge wars there would be in the future. Regardless of whether it was the Hyderabad ores of the massive or deposit, to Wang Chong, they were all in preparation for the wars to come. Only by preparing from the very start would he be able to deal with the catastrophe of the future, even if no one knew about it except for him. However, a very practical dilemma laid itself before him. Despite sitting atop a huge fortune and a massive superior mine, Wang Chong didn't possess the capability to even develop it. Needless to say, utilize it to create an abundance of war machines. Wang Chong was capable of forging the astounding Wuxia steel saber, Death's Abyss, which was worth 300,000 gold taels. But the construction of war machine required massive manpower, and Wang Chong wasn't skilled in this aspect. Perhaps it's time for me to approach a swordsmithing clan, Wang Chong thought. In the capital, there were no better swordsmithing clans than the Zhang, Cheng, Huang, and Lu clan. In terms of scale, manpower, and resources, they far surpassed Wang Chong's capability as an individual. Young master, the Zhang clans Zhang Tsong and Zhang Jian request to meet you. Just as Wang Chong was deep in thought, a voice suddenly echoed in his ear. Turning around to take a look, he saw Shanhai walking into the room. Ha ha ha! Great! Truly! Speak of the devil! Hurry up and invite them in! Wang Chong's eyes lit up, and he hurriedly stood up from his seat. Wang Chong met Zhang Tsong and Zhang Jian at the lounge. Wang Chong didn't change much in the past few months, but on the other hand, Zhang Tsong and Zhang Jian subconsciously started acting a little restrained before him. The same people, yet under different conditions. Right now, Wang Chong no longer needed them. It was them who needed Wang Chong. Wang Gongzi, we are here for the Hyderabad mine. We would like to ask if Wang Gongzi is interested in working with us. Zhang Jian pondered for a moment, and eventually, he decided to dive straight into the topic. Even though he was the one who brought up the idea, he knew how implausible it was. There was a high possibility that Wang Chong would refuse them outright. Yet reality caught the duo off guard. All right, that single word caused the duo to suddenly freeze. The large lounge suddenly fell deathly silent. All right? Zhang Jian's mind turned blank in shock, and Zhang Jian instinctively repeated Wang Chong's reply doubtfully. All right? Wang Chong repeated his answer calmly. All right? Zhang Tsong was stunned as well. He couldn't believe his own ears. This time, they came here with the future of the entire clan weighing on their back. In truth, they were already prepared for failure. Yet Wang Chong's simple answer caught them by surprise. All right? Even when hearing it with their own ears, they couldn't help but doubt if they were dreaming. Zhang Tsong and Zhang Jian stared at each other, and they could see the delight and astonishment in the other's eyes. Happiness came too unexpectedly. Who? Zhang Jian took in a deep breath and calmed himself down. Contained within the Wuxia steel trade were massive profits and opportunities. No rational man would agree to this matter so easily. Zhang Jian knew that there had to be conditions to Wang Chong's agreement. Then, may I know what Gongzi's request is? Zhang Jian asked carefully. Appreciation flashed across Wang Chong's face. Indeed, it was much easier to communicate with smart people. I wish to become a stakeholder of the Zhang clan. Wang Chong revealed his motive. Stakeholder. Zhang Tsong and Zhang Jian stared at the youngster before them with a frown on their face. In their entire life, perhaps due to their ignorance, they had never heard of the term stakeholder. What does that mean? Zhang Tsong asked in bewilderment.